The story begins with a war between two factions. One side is in the name of the god Nebula and the other is the orc tribe led by Hegemonia. The war is very tense with the advantage leaning towards Nebula. But at the decisive moment, Hegemonia is the one who successfully preserves his forces thanks to the prayer strategy. But in fact, this is just a game called Lost War, the Lost World. In this world, faith and prayer always bring meaningful results. Hegemonia is the second-ranked player on the server. Just now, Nebula used nuclear weapons to attack. But Hegemonia was also prepared for this situation. The method he used was to have many orcs pray to create a holy orc with a huge size, who could withstand missiles with bare hands. This made him very proud and thought that the victory would surely belong to him. On the other side of the screen, Nebula also nodded to the careful preparation of his opponent. The nature of the orc tribe in Lost War makes them very easy to increase their population. So Hegemonia's use of his tribal numbers to pray is a smart method. They also chose the sky as the largest space and patrolled and adjusted. And behind the screen, a civilization of technology was being prepared. The holy orc was really amazing. But Nebula was not easy either. Praising Hegemonia as such, but these things were just trivial in his eyes. If he chose the sky as his master, then Nebula was even better at using the universe as his home. From the top, far from the Earth, the satellite full of kinetic weapons of Nebula launched. When Hegemonia discovered this, he was shocked, hurriedly ordered the holy orc to stop it. But unfortunately, the weapon that Nebula used was pure Wolfram bars. This is a super hard metal, with a fracture resistance greater than diamond. Nebula dropped a few bars from such a high altitude. Hegemonia's holy orc, no matter how strong, could not beat the acceleration of gravity. Indeed, the pure Wolfram bars with terrifying falling speed directly pierced the body of the holy orc. The position where they fell was the temple and palace of the orc tribe. The king was dead, along with countless tribesmen who had to be buried. The faith that Hegemonia painstakingly built also collapsed in an instant. The moment the holy orc that he was very proud of gradually disappeared, Nebula just sneered. Hegemonia, you did very well. The system screen sent a message that you are the winner. Nebula still stood on the top 1 position, which made Hegemonia furious. He lost but still stubbornly refused to accept, constantly sending challenge requests to Nebula. Hey, I want to fight another match, because now is the time I start my winning streak. But Nebula bluntly refused, because Hegemonia did not admit defeat, so he thought he still had something. But after the last battle, it seemed that he had exposed everything he had. Nebula skimmed the notification for a while. He had completed all the tasks, so fast that the game had not updated anything new yet. Bored, Nebula stretched his shoulders, suddenly saw the screen blinking. There was a message, wondering who was bothering him now. Amazing achievement. Until now, you are the only one who has achieved all the achievements. Thank you for enjoying the Lost World game for so long. Nebula looked at the new letter for a long time. Is this going to close the service? Probably not, right? Right after that, another message was sent. The lost word that Nebula used all the time was still in the beta testing process. It is now scheduled to officially launch. Nebula players can enjoy the game before opening the official service. Do you want to start right away? Nebula didn't think much, immediately pressed yes. Everything around suddenly darkened. When he opened his eyes again, the scene had changed completely. The first thing Nebula saw was an ancient ruin. Meanwhile, the clothes he wore looked like a game character. What is this? Is this playing too much games and having delusions? Or am I dreaming? It's not a dream, a strange voice rang out. This person seemed to read Nebula's thoughts. You are the chosen one, Nebula. Please allow me to welcome you, my name is Aldine. Nebula stared at the other person, who wore a large cloak, completely unable to see his face. Around Nebula there were still many other people. They all covered their faces, their figures vague like shadows. In his head, he had 100,000 questions. Why? And Aldine seemed to understand all the doubts in Nebula's heart. I'm sure everyone is curious, so I'll get straight to the point. Aldine stepped forward 2 steps, raised his hand to the sky. A blue planet appeared in the middle of the universe in front of him. What is this? Earth? It doesn't look like it. The doubt in Nebula's heart rose higher. He had seen this scene many times before. Without waiting for Nebula to speak, Aldine immediately continued. That's right, this is Lost World. And now, in the vast Lost World, you have become true gods. The Lost World is not just a virtual world. It is a land abandoned by the gods after a great disaster in the past. On this planet, a fallen civilization flourished. There are many races living in harmony with each other. But for some mysterious reasons, the gods abandoned it. A mysterious force is always trying to find people who are qualified to become new gods. That's why Lost World was created as a game. It was created with the purpose of finding new candidates for the position of the gods. That's why Nebula and a few others are standing here. If they can win the trust and reliance of many people, gradually they will go to the supreme position and become the only god of the lost world and can do whatever they want. What if I quit now? Someone wondered. If you quit, you will immediately return to reality. Then, you will lose all your memories of this world. What about quitting halfway? You won't be able to quit halfway after you start. What will happen if I am defeated by other gods? This time it was Nebula's turn to wonder. That is a holy ending that we all look forward to. This answer from Aldine obviously couldn't satisfy Nebula. But he guessed that it was equivalent to death. Clearly, they were risking their lives. If so, with a bloodthirsty person like Nebula, he had no reason to give up. After spreading everything, Aldine confirmed once more whether anyone wanted to quit or not. Then he spread a stack of cards on the table. Nebula knew what this meant. In one of those cards, it meant choosing a small area on the planet to start for yourself. Around there were a few people who quit. Initially there were 32, now there were only 27. Nebula was the first to be chosen. It seemed that the order of selection was based on the ranking in the game. He stepped forward a few steps, picked up a card. After seeing the position inside, Nebula immediately disappeared in front of everyone. Nebula fell into the far east of the continent, in the insect district. This is the place with the lowest winning rate, but also the least conflict in the early time. As soon as Nebula arrived, the first species he met was the frog people. It was very difficult to use attack strategies in this area, so choosing insect-eating species as targets was quite advantageous. The frog people fit that criterion, but they made Nebula worry about the number of branches. There were about 500 branches in the whole species, and it was hard to find out which one was the first. Moreover, in the Lost World, it could affect the creatures with the same level of faith. But the faith of the frog people was only 10. This was a very small number, and it was hard for Nebula to control them all. So he started looking for another target. This time, Nebula looked at the lizard people. They also ate insects and could survive in places without water. The number of species was declining, which was a good thing. Nebula carefully observed a group of lizard people through the status window. There were countless ones who were sick, old, and weak. Among them was one who was severely injured. Nebula glanced at him and felt that he must have been isolated in the group after a failed power struggle. He must have felt hated by the whole world. If a miracle appeared at this time, he could win his trust. Nebula thought for a long time, then chose him as his first target. The whole group of lizard people walked in the dry and hot desert. Suddenly, they spotted an injured antelope. They hadn't eaten meat for a long time. Immediately, the strongest one sprinted towards it. The wounded antelope would not be able to escape. The group of lizard people was very large, and the meat of the antelope was limited. The old and sick ones in the group sighed a few times. The old and injured ones like us had no share. Very quickly, the meat of the antelope was eaten up, leaving only the white bones. But not yet. Some lizard people wanted to take advantage of the marrow of its bones. But that was stopped by the leader. Eat that much, leave some for those who couldn't hunt. The bones of the antelope were thrown to the old and injured ones. They shared the bones and sucked them. The lizard who was severely injured that Nebula watched also got a small part. This made the healthy lizard people very unhappy. They questioned the leader named Jail why he shared food with someone who was about to die. After all, his wound was starting to rot. Thanks to him blocking the saber-toothed tiger, many people survived. I appreciate that. Jail sighed. But the other lizard people still disagreed, because they all thought that it was not necessary to share the scarce food with someone who was about to die. Night fell. The whole group of lizard people huddled together to sleep. Only the severely injured lizard was lying in a corner. A blue butterfly appeared in the dark night, making him wake up with a start. The night butterfly flew around his head for a long time, making him unable to control himself and get up to follow. A few other lizard people in the group noticed that. Look, it seems that RRak finally left the group. Shoo, let him go, just watch quietly. RRak hugged his severely injured arm and followed the butterfly. He still thought he was hallucinating. It seemed that the whole group of lizard people only he could see the butterfly. But RRak didn't give up. He felt the butterfly was leading him to something. When he climbed to the top of the mountain, something caught RRak's eye, making him more anxious than ever. A pile, exactly a pile of beetles. Lizards are insectivorous animals. This is food from heaven, what else? Moreover, with this amount, it may be enough for the whole 7 to eat in a few days. Nebula watched everything from above. RRak followed his plan. He felt that finding this pile of beetles was a miracle, a seed for a little later awe. Through the status window, Nebula could see everything. RRak did not keep the beetles for himself but informed the whole herd. This made everyone ecstatic. They hadn't eaten so well in a long time. RRak held a beetle in his hand. He observed for a long time, feeling very grateful. At the same time, the system sent RRak's herd to be very grateful for the divine power of the unnamed insect god. Nebula stared at the message for a long time. Didn't he send the butterfly to lead RRak? Why now it turned into thanking the unnamed insect god? This name is a bit reluctant. But at first there was no god who owned a beautiful name. RRak, Nebula looked down from above, smiled smugly. I think from now on, to me, you will be very important. And of course, with you, I am too. A few days later, Nebula sent the butterfly to RRak again. This time too, only he saw this butterfly. Yesterday I had a full meal. RRak's strength also recovered a bit. He insisted on following the butterfly, even though he didn't know where it would lead him this time. RRak, you intend to chase the illusion? Another lizard in the herd asked excitedly. After the beetle feast a few days ago, they no longer showed an attitude of alienation or hatred towards RRak. Winter is coming, but the beetles appear from the cold side. If we go this way, we will die of frostbite. So, why don't you ignore the illusion and go in another direction? I don't think so. Although feeling very vague, RRak had no other way. Where his herd stood was a desert with no food or water. The butterfly had led him to the treasure once. So this time, even if he had to fight hard with danger, he still wanted to follow it again. Nebula knew where his hesitation came from, and the seed of awe was just forming, not really strong. Anyway, he just gave them a meal. Because it was just the beginning, Nebula couldn't do anything else. Now just hope that RRak will firmly believe in his choice. And he did not disappoint Nebula. RRak carried a child in the herd and walked step by step following the butterfly. Walked for a long time. Where the butterfly led them this time was more shocking than the previous time. RRak's eyes brightened. Everyone listen, the unnamed insect god, that day led us to the Holy Land. In front of them was a green orc island, with trees and a lot of water. This made the whole herd of lizards who had wandered in the desert for too long so happy that they couldn't control their emotions. They cheered, jumped, even shed tears when they saw this orc island. We're alive. RRak, we were right to trust you. The faith of the lizard herd and the unnamed insect god increased by 1 level. At the same time, Nebula's insect colony level also increased by 1 more level. Now he could unlock the insect blessing skill. RRak, do you want to know for sure what I want? Then become my priest, bring my message to your people. Nebula clicked to accept using the insect blessing skill. A ray of light from the sky shone down, shining straight on RRak. That night, when the whole lizard herd was sound asleep, a firefly appeared. It flew around RRak and called out. When RRak opened his eyes, he saw only white around him and many butterflies flying around. Where am I? Is this a dream? RRak's voice called out again. From the dim light, Nebula stepped out. Who are you? He did not answer RRak's question but just raised a hand. Do you want to take my hand? RRak was extremely confused. He did not know who this person was and what he wanted from him. Nebula did not bother to explain to him either. He put a buffalo skull with horns on RRak's hand that he always wore on his face. At that moment RRak was enlightened. You are the unnamed insect god, right? No answer. RRak woke up. He took his dream to tell the whole herd. Everyone thought it was a sign. And the message of the dream was also very clear. The unnamed insect god was asking their herd to sacrifice. And the sacrificial item high, but if they wanted to hunt buffalo, they had to go deep into the forest. That was too risky. Jail strongly opposed this. If they wanted to hunt a buffalo, all the healthy individuals had to rise up together to have a chance. But then who would protect the weak, old, sick in the herd? That's right, RRak did not deny what Jail had just said. He held a spear in his hand, firmly said, I cannot push the whole herd into danger, I will go alone. This statement shocked everyone. Jail was still the first to strongly oppose. It was impossible for RRak to go hunting buffalo alone. He could not watch his kind just rush into death. I'm not reckless. That god, he blessed me. Blessed? Indeed it was. After waking up from the dream last night, RRak's necrotic wound healed miraculously. On his shoulder there were only a few scars left like black stripes on the insects. Although he felt this was very strange, RRak felt it was a blessing that the god had given him. Even so, that could not be the reason for him to go hunting alone. Jail was still not reassured. That's right, the real reason is here. RRak held the stone spear firmly in his hand. He backed up a few steps to take momentum, then threw the spear away. It flew fast like a bullet, piercing straight into a coconut tree far away in front of the astonished eyes of everyone. The whole coconut tree was felled, leaving only the stump. This strength was truly terrifying. The lizard people looked at RRak with a look of awe and a little fear. Unbelievable, you have hidden this strength for so long. The big tree there faded after a spear throw by RRak. This was really hard to believe because he had just been in a life-and-death situation a few days ago. The whole lizard herd each had an expression, constantly marveling at RRak's supernatural ability. From afar, suddenly there was a rumbling sound. RRak looked far away, his face suddenly brightened. Everyone, look over there. The rumbling sound was created by a herd of water buffalo running near there. Joel felt unbelievable. Right, not one or two but a whole large herd. They got lost together in this hot and dry desert. This was the gift that the god had given. RRak did not bother to think much, he hugged the spear and jumped straight down from above. Quickly get down there and kill the buffalo for meat, fill our hungry stomachs. The spear in his hand flew away, piercing through the skull of the lead buffalo. This scene quickly caused the whole herd of buffalo to panic. At this time, Joel and the other strong individuals also jumped down after RRak. They all puffed up their chests with excitement when they saw the delicious smell in front of them. After that, he not only gave us hard-shelled bugs but also meat. Very quickly, under the leadership of RRak, a large herd of water buffalo was wiped out. That night, the lizard people chose an empty piece of land in the middle of Orc Island to set up a sacrificial altar. The buffalo leader was hung up the highest and was still constantly dripping fresh blood. Below were countless skulls of other buffalo piled up. RRak knelt at the first row, raised both hands high and said in a voice that was both joyful and sincere, "O nameless armored dragon god, although not much, please accept the offerings that we sincerely offer." Joel and the whole bunch of demons behind him also bowed their heads sincerely and repeated what RRak had just said. Please accept the offerings that we sincerely offer. Of course, Nebula would not miss this spectacular scene. Although the ritual to this ceremony was still sloppy and clumsy, but giving is better than receiving. He had already felt the sincere heart of the lizard people. The evidence was when he checked the faith parameter in the system, it had skyrocketed. This made Nebula feel very happy. Especially the performance of RRak. Although he was just chosen as a priest, he had worked hard to prepare such a large-scale sacrificial altar. It was not a waste of Nebula's thoughts and efforts to arrange it. However, not everything was rosy. Nebula soon realized the problem when he saw the lizard people starving to the point of eating even the young buffalo. Well, at this point, he couldn't expect them to have any knowledge of farming and animal husbandry. Just temporarily like that, Nebula sighed casually. This Orc Island was not big, surrounded by endless desert, the resources here were not much. Therefore, if this lizard people only knew how to eat ready-made food, they would not be able to withstand more than a few years. Sooner or later they would go to the state of exhaustion and extinction. But the knowledge and skills related to animal husbandry and cultivation were really hard to learn by themselves. And if Nebula himself instructed, it would go against the law of karma. This made him very headache. Well, that's not to say there's no way, just a little time-consuming. First of all, just continue with the blessing. RRak continued to receive blessings from Nebula. The next morning, when Joel woke up, he saw RRak wearing a very different outfit, more majestic and imposing than yesterday. RRak, you got up early. Well, I want to observe the sacrificial altar a bit. Last night, RRak had a strange dream. That made him confused and scared. In his dream, he saw the ponds full of fish and shrimp had dried up. The land on this Orc Island was also barren to the point that no grass or trees could grow. The whole lizard people fell into starvation and thirst. This morning when he woke up, the sacrificial altar kept shaking, making RRak even more uneasy. It's still a long time before that, Joel comforted. I know, but RRak can't help but worry. He didn't know if the dream last night was a message or not. He believed in God, but it was very hard to understand God's message. RRak began to climb up the sacrificial altar, sitting at the highest place to observe the four directions. But if we don't understand God's will, then we are betraying God. That's what I'm most afraid of. As he was speaking, RRak suddenly stopped. His eyes became extremely alert. RRak signaled Joel to climb up there to observe more clearly. From afar, something was creeping closer. Well, now we understand why the sacrificial altar keeps shaking. That's the bastards who kicked our asses in the previous battle. The newcomers also belonged to the lizard people, but they belonged to a different branch. Their distinctive blue appearance made RRak and Joel recognize the enemy from afar. The leader of the group was very boastful when riding on a huge monster. No normal lizard could control that thing. Moreover, looking at the number, it seemed that they had dragged their entire tribe here. This blue-skinned group had once driven RRak out of the old land, which used to be a lush swamp full of food. Today, seeing them drag the whole stove away like this, Joan confirmed that their old homeland had been eaten by them. Do they know about this Orc Island? Joel felt the safety of his flock was threatened. Let's see, with this terrain, they have no ability to detect unless they climb up, so it is very likely that they will pass by without noticing. RRak had just finished speaking, a deafening scream rang out. Hey you guys! This is the holy land of the incarnation of the unnamed armored dragon god. You come from the blue-skinned tribe, don't you? Don't step here even one step. Unfortunately, the blue-skinned lizards had not detected them yet. Now they have. RRak and Joel helplessly touched their foreheads. They forgot that today the guard was Ur. This young kid with a young mind had nothing else but lack of thinking and loud mouth. Well, now, pray to my grandfather in this bush. It seems that another battle between the two tribes is inevitable. But don't worry, this must be the will of the god. The optimistic tribal minister RRak patted Joel's shoulder a few times, then grabbed the spear. He must have thought that this was just a small test that the armored dragon god gave. If he couldn't pass, then his entire tribe would not deserve to stay here anymore. But it's not just a test, RRak felt this was a mission. The leader of the blue-skin tribe was a powerful man but had no compassion. He must have abandoned all his wounded tribesmen after the last battle. Therefore, RRak wanted to stand up and fight, not only for his tribesmen but also for the weaker fellow men. This reaction was very pleasing to Nebula. RRak always understood him. The appearance of the blue-skin tribe was not to fight one for one, but these two tribes had to merge with each other to reach the appropriate number of tribesmen. RRak had a very firm will and a thinking mind. Nebula felt more and more that he was a perfect priest that he had chosen. Hey, you noisy kid, are you here? The leader of the blue-skin tribe taunted. The kid who wears you, this is our land, Ur shouted back. Well, what's in this land? Every bush, rock, prey is ours. And the incarnation of the armored dragon god too. This time it was not Ur who answered him but RRak. The guy didn't understand what the incarnation of the armored dragon god was, but whatever. He just needed to know that there were trees, water, and prey here. Therefore, he immediately threatened, demanding that RRak's entire tribe quickly disappear before being beaten. The monster that he rode also knew how to cooperate with the owner, roaring and intimidating for a while. The leader of the blue-skin tribe was very confident in his strength. Not only him but the number of his tribe must have been enough to overwhelm RRak's tribesmen. From ancient times, if you were a leader, you would probably know how to calculate the win or lose. I know, but I don't want to attack you. The blue-skinned lizard thought he had heard wrong. He laughed, thinking that RRak was a fool who didn't know the sky high and the earth thick. But RRak was not shaken, his spear pointed straight at the opponent. Those who have lost their homes can enter the arms of God. Then, God will take care of you as in his message. The leader of the blue-skin tribe couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. He laughed uproariously, as if he had just heard the funniest story in the world. What the hell is God? For him, there is no God. Only strength decides everything. If RRak was determined not to surrender, then he wouldn't mind having a bloody battle between the two sides. And RRak, with his strong faith in God, was not afraid at all. Those who do not know God, does not mean that God does not exist. All talk nonsense. Fine, then I'll send you to death. Not to mention the strength of the blue-skinned leader, just the beast he rode was very terrifying. To say not afraid at all is a lie. At the present time, when the other guy was rushing over, RRak also felt very tense. He silently prayed for God to grant him courage and strength to fight the enemy. But the gap in strength between the two sides was still too large. The spear in RRak's hand quickly broke into many pieces. This was his only weapon, which had helped him kill a herd of water buffalo, but now it was shattered like this. In front of that scene, the leader of the blue-skin tribe became more smug. He chuckled, as if he had already secured the victory. You fool! His mount lifted its front legs, wanting to aim straight at RRak and trample him. With this size, if trampled, the whole person would be flattened. Above, Nebula was watching the battle without missing a second. The power or side was still quite balanced. Just then, the system sent a new notification. You have shown a lot of interest in a tribe. Now, this tribe will become part of your territory. Area, Lizard Man Level 1. At the same time, a new skill was also unlocked. Nebula didn't think much, immediately pressed the agree button to use. Right at the moment when the claw of the beast was about to land, a ray of light from the high sky shone straight into RRak's body. Just like the time he was blessed before, his body changed markedly. The leader of the blue-skin tribe thought that his mount had trampled RRak. Just one blow was enough to send all his opponents to sell salt. But when the dust settled, he was shocked to see the other party still safe and sound. Even RRak had something different. The intimidation from him had grown much stronger. Through the status board, Nebula could assess the strength of both sides. The leader of the blue-skin tribe had a strength index of 24 and an intelligence of 16. But his innate skill was taming. That's why he owned such a monstrous mount. The beast was called Manhwa, although it was only level 1, but its strength index had reached 87. Nebula wanted to help RRak tame this thing, so he used a new skill called Powerful Incarnation. This temporarily grants the user an additional index called Holy Power D, 1D equivalent to 200 times the maximum value of the original strength. In other words, RRak's strength index was originally 30, but now it has increased to 630. Just a step into a punch that tore the wind, Manhwa was knocked down. Everyone around was gaping in astonishment. This overwhelming difference in strength was the first time they saw it. Even Joel, who was always known as the strongest in the group, couldn't believe his eyes. But the leader of the blue-skin tribe was not satisfied. He thought that RRak had used some dirty trick to quickly reverse the situation. Taking advantage of RRak's inattention, he took a knife and rushed to stab him secretly. But the strength difference between 24 and 630 was like heaven and earth. RRak didn't even need to use force to punch the blue-skinned guy and knock him down on the ground. Now, who's next? He looked at the blue-skin tribe, his voice cold and harsh. The whole tribe on the other side saw their leader defeated. Moreover, they lost so humiliatingly that they dropped their weapons and knelt down to surrender. We admit defeat, we will be loyal to you. The conflict ended. RRak looked at his hands for a long time. He could feel that the god had entered him just now. The feeling of his body being full of strength given by the god directly was the best experience since he was born. That night, RRak's tribe and the new members gathered around the fire in the Orc Island. The two sides soon integrated because they were people of the same species. The blue-skinned lizard people were amazed to know that RRak's tribesmen used to be the same tribe as them. Because the two sides currently had different appearances. Why is your skin color different? That's because we followed an unnamed beetle god. Since then, we have evolved and become much stronger. If not, we would have died in nature long ago. At first, the newcomers didn't believe it. But after looking at the altar made of buffalo skulls, and looking at RRak sitting far away, they felt that what they had heard was not unreasonable. The existence of a lizard person with such superior strength as RRak, if not guided by a god, would be against the natural law. On this side, Joel was talking to RRak. He was very worried because the merger of the two tribes had increased the population by 6 times. With that momentum, this Orc Island would soon lose its value and they would fall into starvation again. RRak had also thought about this, and the solution he aimed for was to take his tribesmen out. Out to nature again? We can't just wander out there without any answer. Joel was not reassured. But RRak was full of determination. No, the answer will be right there. The answer was sent by the god, through our brother. A few days later, RRak's subordinates encountered a very headache problem. They had the task of taking care of Manhwa. This monster was very disobedient. Although its former owner had died, it still refused to obey, and even intended to make salad of the people who were controlling it. At this time, RRak appeared with a few turnips. Manhwa saw him appear and immediately became much calmer. After all, it was a monster with intelligence, and it hadn't forgotten the person who knocked it unconscious a few days ago. RRak was very friendly. He had no intention of beating or torturing Manhwa. He felt that if the god had let it live, there must have been some plan. Eat. Manhwa was still shy at first, but it was really hungry. The turnips were so tempting that it couldn't help but open its mouth and bite a piece. With food in, Manhwa was much more obedient. RRak stroked its head a few times, and threw a bunch of more turnips. Manhwa was now as docile as a watchdog. It lay down on the ground. Its face and eyes had completely lost their usual fierceness. RRak praised. The taming of Manhwa was almost done. He had a few more important things to deal with. The first was weapons. A tribesman in RRak's herd held the secret of forging sharp weapons far beyond RRak's crude stone spears. But to forge that, they had to use a lot of good wood to burn. The destruction of this motherland made RRak a bit hesitant. Okay, I'll think more about it and give you an answer tomorrow. After he left, another person came to see him, this time an old lizard. Before joining RRak's tribe, he was a lone wanderer. But because of that, he learned how to read the road. I can lead people to places that help us not starve. I know a few places like that, but I'm not sure if they're still the same as before. This was an urgent matter as this Orc Island was running out of resources. But Joel was worried that there were other tribes in those new places. RRak thought that didn't matter. If there really were people living in those places and they resisted us, then just defeat them and take them over like we did with the Green tribe. However, the lizard guide was just a newcomer after all. RRak didn't really trust him. Because his tribe was so big, if they went out there and went the wrong way, they would surely starve to death. Answering RRak's doubt, the guide pointed to the sky. When night falls, the stars are the clearest map. He had figured out the changes of the stars according to their fixed nature and never got lost because of that. Now I will show you the movement of the stars. If you check for a few more days, you can see that I'm not lying. Then I should be able to get your trust, right? The two leaned their heads together and talked for a long time. RRak listened very attentively. So now in a few more days I'll come back and check again. Got it, RRak nodded. After the guide left, Jur came looking. No offense, but I think RRak is as busy as a K-pop idol. Jur came to report on the situation of Mandrake. Although it still seemed a bit dissatisfied, it had become much more obedient because it was fed on time. RRak's taming of Mandrake gave Joel a few ideas in his head. Could we tame other things like we tamed Mandrake? What? Other animals, for example? Joel looked at the water buffalo in the distance. At this moment, it seemed that Nebula's plan had taken another step. It seemed that RRak's tribe was gradually realizing that they couldn't just move from one place to another to exploit the available resources. People talk about a certain point in human history when division of labor took place. The first time was farming and animal husbandry. Farming would be more stable because the great civilizations all originated around the big rivers. But the tribe that Nebula chose was the lizard people with strong bodies, suitable for fighting and adapting well. They were suitable for animal husbandry, not farming. Nebula was very pleased to see everything going according to his desired order. The lizard people had begun to learn a new technique, which was metallurgy. RRak had agreed with the blacksmith yesterday, and they quickly got to work on making weapons. Very quickly, the weapons and tools from the basic book were formed, although they were not as solid as bronze. But compared to the stone tools that RRak and his tribesmen used before, this was a great progress. Moreover, there was also an unexpected achievement that even Nebula did not foresee. It was the guide who had planted the seeds for astronomy in this world. Of course, it was still too primitive to be called astronomy, but Nebula was full of confidence that they could use it well in the future. At this time, RRak and the guide also met again to discuss the changes of the stars. And indeed, everything he said was true. RRak had completely placed his trust in him, and also had more motivation to carry out the plans that he had in mind. That night, he gathered all his tribesmen around the altar. RRak had not been serious for a long time, so most people felt quite tense. The god led us to this land for a long time, and we even met our brothers again. We could have driven them away as they had done or lived alone and lonely so that we could live here longer. Of course, those who were driven away would die in the forest, but that was wrong. God wants to save us, not to eliminate anyone. That way, more people will live. Everyone listened attentively to every word of RRak. Finally, he made up his mind. When dawn comes tomorrow, RRak will lead his tribesmen away from here. The crowd was buzzing because they had never thought of that. To reassure everyone, RRak invited the guide up. Now he absolutely respected and called him an astrologer. These days, the astrologer has explained to us the rules of the changes of the constellations. And we confirm that what he says is completely correct. The astrologer will be the one to guide us. Then, RRak let the guide explain the new place where they would go. When dawn comes, everyone will go to the right of the sun. For 10 days like that, then continue to go along the right of the rotten lake for another 15 days. Finally, it was 3 days along the mountain roads and desolate valleys. Their destination will be an endless forest with many wild beasts inside. That is also where many herds of different races live together. It will be a safe and ideal place. RRak nodded. In front of the eyes of the whole tribe, he stepped up to the high platform, then asked a question that seemed to have nothing to do with the current issue. Ur, why haven't you eaten the water buffalo that you hunted yesterday? All eyes were focused on Ur, making him extremely confused. It was true that Ur had hunted a water buffalo yesterday. Although he was also very hungry, the food situation on the Orc Island had become scarce, so he decided to save it. It's not that I'm not hungry, it's just that I think maybe in the future we need food to keep our word. Ur was afraid that he would be scolded and explained. But RRak not only did not scold him, but also praised Ur. Before, the lizard people always ate like starving to death, never had the concept of saving or keeping their word. Ur was the first person to know how to look far and wide, worthy of being a role model for other tribesmen. To encourage that spirit, RRak gave him a surplus. That was the newly forged spear that was still shiny. A metal spear was a very luxurious thing. So everyone was very envious of Ur. Even he himself didn't believe that just because he abstained from eating a water buffalo, he was generously rewarded by RRak like this. In addition, those who followed your words, those who resisted the desire to eat and drink normally also deserved to receive this spear. Owning a metal spear made their status in the tribe suddenly much higher. The remaining lizard people were very envious and very greedy. Not stopping there, RRak also prepared another ritual. He used the buffalo skulls to make masks like the one Nebula used. RRak himself also wore one, and the people he gave the mask to were called bone soldiers. From now on, you will be protected by God and become true warriors. The path to the future is only successful when you have the perseverance and patience that you have shown us. This is the will of heaven. Very quickly, a team of bone soldiers was formed. RRak chose the strongest and most determined people. They will be responsible for pioneering and protecting the whole herd. He looked at the altar one last time, still determined to take his people away from the Holy Land. God will always be with us, so we will not have to depend on a fixed place anymore. Everyone, remember the nameless armored dragon god always in your mind. The journey ahead is not easy, but just be brave and move on. As long as you persist, we will surely get the sweet fruit. It cannot be denied that RRak is a good leader. Just through these words, the spirit of the whole tribe was pushed to the sky. Although the journey will be very long and exhausting, no one is afraid or timid anymore. Nebula observed the whole process, feeling very satisfied. RRak did not disappoint his expectations at all. In the group, there were also many new outstanding elements, like Ural. Now instead of developing a new organization, this lizard people is a very promising future. RRak, you have done very well, not betraying my trust. From now on, you are the perfect start. The next morning, when the sun rose, the lizard people began to move. They walked for a long time without stopping, until the dry heat of the desert made Mandrake exhausted. It roared and collapsed to the ground. RRak guessed that if this little monster was so exhausted, there must be many people who were very tired. So he had the whole tribe stop and rest for a while. In the herd, whispers began to sound. Resting for a while, how much better can it be? I don't even know if we can get anywhere, we don't have anything to eat yet. This was a very sensitive time, they had been walking for 3 days without stopping, and the food was almost gone. The spirit of RRak's tribe was also not surprising, but he had no other way but to continue to persevere and hope for the miracle of the gods. Suddenly at this time, a man ran up hastily. Chief, there is a herd appearing right in front of us, they are the bastards without scales. The bastards without scales in his words were the individuals of the national army. It seemed that they had just encountered a terrible monster and were fleeing. But they hadn't run far before they ran into RRak's tribe. Just looking at the number, it was clear that the two sides were not equal in strength, let alone strength. Seeing these guys, RRak just exclaimed and said with an indifferent tone. Oh, these are the ones without scales. The goblins knew they were no match for this tribe. First, they stood still in fear. After a while of reacting, the leader of the group knelt down. The ones behind also hurriedly followed. The goblin soldier in front offered RRak a bag, inside which were only a few tiny turnips. Sorry, he stuttered in fear, there was a misunderstanding here. We just wanted to quickly escape from that canyon. These goblins were actually in a desperate situation. They had to leave their homes to flee. Because of the hard forest, they wanted to find some food, accidentally bumping into RRak's tribe. Why did you have to run away? The goblin leader pointed to the hill in the distance and began to tell his misery. They used to live there, although not very rich and prosperous, but also called enough to eat. Until one day, the terrible monster appeared and turned their lives upside down. Monster? Nebula on high heard the two words monster and also fell into a trance for a while. He tried to find out about it. It was an ancient armor level 9 with a strength of 120 and an intelligence of 12. In the game Lost World, it was described as a creature created by the ancient gods. Even after these gods disappeared, it still stubbornly existed in this world. The goblins could not be its opponents. It was understandable that they ran away from the old forest. RRak was led by the goblin leader to where the ancient armor was reigning. It was undeniable, its size was too huge, almost occupying the entire width of a cliff. The body was mottled with black and orange, looking like a centipede. Around it were countless dry bones, probably of the unfortunate victims who could not escape the poison of this monster. The poison of the ancient armor was also the special ability that made it one of the most difficult to eat. Because this special ability could make the blessings of the gods be forgotten. Nebula nodded, such a powerful enemy, the goblins scattered was inevitable. RRak observed the ancient armor for a while. This thing was sleeping soundly, in a trance, it unconsciously made a few sounds like normal people talking nonsense. But that was all that made the ground tremble warmly. RRak was thinking of going around. Because the strength of the two sides was too different, he didn't think he could defeat the ancient armor. But according to the astronomer, if they went around, they would lose another 8 days. 8 days later, Nebula could see RRak's hesitation. This was also understandable. He was in a dilemma, not knowing what to do right. In this situation where the tribal members were all terrified, going around was not bad. But the problem was that their strength was exhausted and the food problem was also quite difficult. Nebula was looking forward to what RRak would do in the situation. Seeing that RRak was still silent for a long time, Joel was the first to speak. "Chief, we have to fight. Right now, we have the advantage." Nebula scrolled through Joel's information. This guy was not bad at all. Although his strength was not outstanding, he had a very smart mind. When Joel mentioned the advantage, the goblins looked very puzzled. But this was what Joel had drawn after observing the terrain of this area very carefully. "Chief, do you remember the fastest way for the blacksmith to increase the temperature of the metal?" RRak only knew that the blacksmith had used some special tool. Joel explained that it was called a blowpipe. It helped to suck out the air and save energy. RRak knew for sure that Joel did not mention this thing for no reason. "You mean, if we use it, we will have strength without having to spend a lot of effort?" But Joel, the blacksmith, had to think for a long time to design it. "We don't need to use something complicated like that." Joel looked at the huge rocks hanging on the cliff. Just a simple tool was enough. Those rocks would surely be the thing to help RRak's tribe defeat the monster. But how to push them down the cliff when their bodies were so small? That was when Joel's scientist brain came in handy. He made some simple levers. One end under the rock, the other end pulled down by the skeleton team. The sound of 1, 2, 3 rang rhythmically. Nebula silently praised Joel for using the rock to crush the ancient armor. This was a simple and effective way. But to succeed, all those rocks had to fall at the same time. Would they succeed? According to Joel's count, the rocks were simultaneously levered down the valley. The big movement woke up the ancient armor. It looked up in confusion, only to see a huge rain of rocks falling from the sky. The rocks crushed the monster, making it scream in pain. Hearing this scream, RRak and his people leaned over the valley. "Did we succeed?" "Not yet," Nebula muttered. As soon as he finished saying this, the ancient armor buried under the rocks angrily emerged. It was badly injured. But the pain also increased its fighting spirit and bloodlust. After identifying the culprit, the ancient armor furiously clung to the cliff and rushed up. Joel hurriedly ordered his people to push down the remaining rocks. Too late, Nebula saw this scene, couldn't help but sigh. He had to do something. RRak was still bewildered a second ago. A second later suddenly his body was full of vitality. He used the last bit of consciousness left in his body, realized that the nameless god armor was once again merging with him. The normal lever that took 3 or 4 people to push with all their strength, now only RRak could do well. Even, to save time, he directly pushed the rocks down the valley with his bare hands. "Push, push, you just have to follow me." RRak was madly pushing rocks, while ordering his subordinates. But he was sure that the monster would not lose to them. But now if they don't do anything, they will all die. Thinking of this, RRak with Nebula's soul took the iron spear and decisively jumped down the valley. Joel felt his heart skip a beat. He didn't know that the god armor had entered the body of their leader, so he felt RRak must have gone crazy. The ancient armor from below rushed up, RRak from above rushed down like two opposite vectors. When it was about 10 meters away, he used all his strength to stab the spear in his hand down. At the same time, a large amount of huge rocks also fell down. The terrible gravity made the ancient armor lose direction. Taking advantage of this opportunity, on the cliff, Joel ordered the skeleton team to push down another huge rock. This time, the ancient armor had no way out. It was badly injured. Now it couldn't resist anymore. It was crushed by the rock to the bottom of the valley. Nebula tiredly left RRak's body and slumped on the chair. Just now, it seemed to use too much force. The system immediately sent a notification that RRak's tribe had officially defeated the ancient armor. The Joels rejoiced and cheered on the cliff. Thanks to this event, the reverence of the lizard man tribe for Nebula continued to increase. As a result, the faith point was also raised. At the same time, Nebula also received a hunting reward. This was also the reason why he had to help RRak defeat the armor of the great abomination. This reward was the essence of abomination. Each god had their own resources suitable for their domain. Although this could be created from faith, to make something that did not exist, we still needed rare materials. With the essence of abomination, Nebula could create a spirit beast. A spirit beast was a machine that produced faith resources, conveying the message of the god by its very existence. Moreover, it also had the ability to grow. If the spirit beast was trained to a higher realm, it could even obtain the profession of the land or the incarnation of the god. Nebula considered for a while, Perhaps the method of creating a spirit beast in this world was no different from the game Lost World. If so, what would I create? The essence in Nebula's hand glowed, emitting a brilliant red light. After defeating the ancient armor, the first thing that RRak cared about was whether its meat was edible. Han took a leg of the monster, then put it in his mouth to try. The meat of this monster was edible, the taste was not too bad but it smelled too much, it seemed hard to eat raw. Johal then thought of a way, which was to cook the meat with fire, and add some other spices such as rosemary to mask the smell. He did it right away, he cooked a leg for RRak to try again. This time, the feeling was completely different. A bit bland but quite delicious, RRak honestly expressed his opinion after mukbang. This time Joel contributed a lot, the meat of the ancient armor was very smelly, making RRak wonder if he should throw it away. But Joel had thought of a reasonable solution, so they didn't have to worry about food for the time being. When RRak was still enjoying the meat, Joel suddenly brought up another issue. It was that the chief of the goblin tribe had found a successor. RRak had heard about this. But not at all, what Joel really wanted to mention was to urge RRak to quickly find himself a bride. The food was about to reach his mouth, but he had to stop. RRak was like a stone in front of this proposal. But Joel continued to use all kinds of arguments to persuade him. You are not young anymore, isn't this a very important matter for our tribe? Find a bride? RRak was very hesitant. If you have never thought about it, how do you see me? Damn, at this point, not only RRak sprayed glue but I also stiffened. I always thought Joel was a strong young man with a better physique than others. I didn't expect him to be a girl. And RRak was also very confused by Joel's proposal. He suddenly saw something shining behind her, so he quickly changed the subject. Hey Joel, what's that behind you? It was a golden tablet with ancient characters. The ignorant ear saw it and put his mouth to it immediately. This is not edible, people. This metal is gold. The wise astrologer saw this and hurriedly explained. Joel had also seen gold, because once she was shown many different metals by the blacksmith. This metal emitted a beautiful golden color and that color would last with time. With a quick mind, Joel affirmed that this was more valuable than other metals. What if it doesn't corrode? What kind of metal is both hard and heavy? I can't even eat it. Ural still didn't give up his passion for mukbang the whole world, he was very angry with the golden tablet. To solve this tale, the star bird mentioned that there were deer tracks around, the meat of that animal was very sweet. Ur's eyes lit up when he heard about food, he returned the gold tablet to RRak and ran away. Holding the gold tablet in his hand, RRak thought for a long time. With their rudimentary understanding, everything was born, died, decomposed, and disappeared. There is nothing in the world that is eternal and unchanging. But this gold tablet was not tarnished at all. If so, the person who created it must have wanted to preserve some message. But the characters engraved on it, RRak did not understand. What does this mean? While thinking vaguely, Joel came looking. RRak was so engrossed in the tablet that he didn't notice the time. It was time to rest. I hid in a corner like this but still got caught by you. Yes, because you are the only lizard wearing fur. It was you who told me to wear this. That's right, because you are the chief, I want you to look different. The chief is also like a symbol of the tribe. Symbol? That night, RRak did not return to rest. In front of him was the deer carcass that was gradually decomposing. The flies and mosquitoes attracted were flying chaotically. But somehow, RRak always felt that their flight path was creating characters. Is this an illusion? RRak rubbed his eyes a few times, sure he wasn't mistaken. He took a dry branch, started to scribble a few strokes on the ground. The next day, early in the morning, RRak came to pull Joel out of the tent. The two leaned their heads together in front of a large piece of land. RRak began to draw a few characters with the scenery. This is me. Is RRak? Yes, this means a male lizard. RRak continued to draw another character next to the one he had just drawn. And this is you. Do you mean I'm female? This character is a female lizard? That's right. Then, RRak drew two horizontal lines like an equal sign between the two characters he had just drawn. And this means we go together. RRak's eyes looked at Joel at this moment no different from the deep-hearted CEOs in Chinese romance novels. And this is also my answer for you. RRak, do you understand the meaning of what you just said? Joel thought he had heard wrong, decided to ask again to be sure. But RRak had spent the whole night thinking. Not only did he create writing, he also understood his thoughts. And so when the dawn just appeared in the distance, RRak held Joel's hand and started a new good relationship. That's how RRak's tribe invented the first writing. This progress made Nebula very happy, although to be able to fully develop this type of writing. But at the beginning of the game, achieving this achievement was very good. Then there was a pretty chill time for the lizard people. They enjoyed being able to hunt deer as much as they wanted. On the surface, it seemed like a normal hunt. But catching a big prey would help the male show his skills in front of the female. This is how the lizards celebrate their wedding. Or in other words, this is the ideal time for RRak to show his superior sides to his soon-to-be wife Joel. A few days later, the lizard people returned the territory to the goblin tribe. Anyway, this used to be their land before being conquered by the ancient armor. RRak returned the old land so they could return to live as before. This made a rough person like the goblin chief also move to tears, and snot flooded. He bowed to RRak, constantly thanking him from the bottom of his heart. Then, he introduced RRak to his son, who was also the new successor chief chosen. By the tribe before, we used to live in fear of being harassed by monsters and bigger tribes. But thanks to you, we were able to overcome that. We will never forget this kindness, RRak. And so the lizard people continued their migration journey. After a while, they made a new discovery. It was the giant footprints of worms on the ground. The astrologer had a wide knowledge. He immediately recognized that these were the footprints of the frogs that walked on two legs. They were the frog people. Seeing RRak looking puzzled, the astrologer continued to explain. The frogs have two types, good and bad. They can speak and think like the lizard people. Based on these footprints, it seemed that they had just gone out to scout. That meant that this tribe had a lot of combat experience. Based on the number of footprints, it could be seen that this scouting team had more than 5 people. RRak predicted that this would be a larger and stronger tribe than theirs. If they continued to go without any preparation, the whole tribe could be in danger. Therefore, he ordered everyone to return to the temporary shelter. That night, RRak and Joel supervised the camp construction. The more and larger temporary camps, the better. Countless bright torches were also lit. This was Joel's idea, because she felt that the other tribes around were more crowded. Expanding the scouting force and guarding at night was very necessary. Let's divide the work fairly, because surely the other tribes are also watching us. Don't neglect the vigilance because someone is too tired. As RRak predicted, the frog people had noticed the presence of the lizard people. They were also secretly observing them from afar. The days after changing the shelter, luckily the whole tribe did not encounter any frog people. During that time, they prepared a lot of things to ensure the safety of the tribe. RRak's tribe also mastered the way of raising livestock and building houses to adapt to the environmental changes. The writing system was also developed quickly, faster than Nebula's expectation. Those characters were shared among the tribe members through a primitive map that combined the traditional hunting marks and symbols. RRak also set up a table to track the harvest output of each person every day. Thanks to the competition, he inadvertently stimulated the diligence of each individual in the tribe. This progress made Nebula very happy. This was truly a wonderful development process. The days after that, the locust swamp in the center of the continent was growing and many insects were also developing their nests in the south. The insect territory quickly rose to level 4. This was a method that Nebula had never dreamed of doing. But because he was in a remote area in the east, Nebula decided to seize this opportunity. Especially when RRak's ability and the index of the whole tribe had risen above average. But Nebula also did not dare to neglect the vigilance. Lost World had become a reality, no longer like sitting in front of the computer playing games. What he went through could be more dangerous and unpredictable. Therefore, every step to come must be very careful. Finally, whatever comes will come. One fine day when RRak was directing his tribesmen to build houses, a scout rushed in and shouted, "Chief, it's not good, the frog people are on their way here." RRak, Joel, Ur and some people from the core team quickly went out to greet them. Not knowing whether they were enemies or friends, but the frog people really brought a feeling of oppression. But what caught RRak's attention more than anything was that standing among the frog people was a lizard person. What was he doing there? And did they come to negotiate peace or not? Leading the frog people was a man with a feather necklace. Before RRak could speak, he introduced himself. He was Shunan, the son of the great chief of the frog people, Alroy. "We have no intention of fighting with you, lizard people." Seeing that the other party seemed polite, RRak gestured for the bone soldiers to lower their weapons. He also introduced himself, and also made clear the point of view that the lizard people had no intention of pointing their swords at the other party. RRak did not forget to ask the reason why the Shunan came here. This guy seemed not mature enough. The evidence was that he had to wait for the frog people behind him to signal with their eyes. "We came to inform you that you are invading our territory." This sounded quite illogical, because when the lizard people came here, there was no sign that this place belonged to another tribe. In fact, the frog people alone could not occupy such a large area. But RRak did not expose them but politely apologized. We are truly sorry for not trying to find out if this land had an owner or not. But we came from a very far place from here, because we still have nowhere to go, so can we settle here? Shunan was a bit flustered when the other party asked that question. He had not yet answered when RRak continued to speak. Shunan, you are the son of the great chief. You must be the only one here who has the right to decide on our request, right? This sentence sounded nothing special. But if you pay attention, you will see that RRak was subtly praising Shunan by cleverly affirming his noble status. Sure enough, Shunan was immediately flattered. After all, he was the successor chief, theoretically he could agree with RRak's request. The frog people behind him saw Shunan smiling with his eyes, they all felt uneasy. But with the current situation, they also did not say anything more. RRak still had a lot of questions, above all why the lizard guy appeared in the frog people's herd. But collecting information had to be careful, not too obvious. So RRak invited Shunan to the village of the lizard people to talk, and also to let them our tribe all agree to say no to hatred, so if we can invite people to visit the village, that would be good, we should all celebrate this. I think that's not a bad idea. Shunan did not refuse. But after the frog guy behind him whispered something in his ear, Shunan changed his mind. I mean, thank you for the invitation, but we still don't have enough trust between us. How about that? But I can't drive away the benefactor who helped the lizard tribe of mine. How about we have a meal together? RRak did not give up his intention, anyway he still had to collect more information from Shunan. This time, with the permission of the frog people behind him, Shunan agreed. He and RRak sat down next to a roasted deer, eating and drinking very happily. Shunan seemed to be a guy who didn't know how to keep his mouth shut, but the frog people behind him were not simple. RRak had quite a few questions, but what made him most curious was still the lizard guy and what their purpose was here. But he couldn't show that he was curious, because if he revealed his thoughts, they could use that as an excuse to attack. So RRak decided to start with a harmless question. What are those big feathers on your neck, Shunan? Oh, these are the feathers of the cockatrice. Cockatrice? Just as I thought, you don't know anything. They are big birds that walk on two legs and live dangerously in this forest. Shunan began to talk endlessly about the bird. They were not only large but also very poisonous, very difficult to hunt this bird. In addition to speed, the movement of the cockatrice was also very complex. That's why the frog people always have to watch over this area. RRak exclaimed, then asked Shunan how they hunted cockatrice.
Do you use javelin weapons? What is a javelin?
RRak hadn't had time to answer. Shunan had called his subordinates to bring the crossbow. This was the first time RRak heard of this weapon. The lizard man named Owen brought a crossbow. Shunan also told him to set up another target board for target practice. Shunan shot an arrow, hitting the center of the board. RRak marveled, it was really accurate. This attitude made Shunan very happy. I have been trained in archery since I was a child. Not to brag, but I am the best archer in the tribe. Can I try this crossbow? Shunan was happy, of course he would not refuse this wish of RRak. RRak tried to hold the crossbow, feeling this weapon. The first thing he saw was the solidity of the string. The arrow when shot out of the crossbow was not as powerful as Lao but easier to hit the target. This weapon was also light and easy to carry. He shot several arrows, none of which hit the target. Shunan laughed out loud. I told you, this is not easy to use. After saying that, he immediately ordered Owen to pick up the arrows. RRak wanted to study more about these arrows, so he also went up to pick up Owen. While picking up the arrows, he also took the opportunity to ask him a few questions. Your name is Owen, right? Owen startled. He stuttered in reply, yes sir. This panicked attitude made RRak feel very puzzled. Why are you a lizard but living in the frog tribe? Well, because Owen hesitated for a long time before he could continue. We live in many tribes in the same village, including frogs and lizards. Why? It's because we depend on each other to live, we live in peace. RRak felt that the living in peace that Owen had just said was illogical. After asking more, he learned what the concept of living in peace really meant. In exchange for the protection of the frogs, the lizards could help them in unfavorable situations. For example, frogs cannot fall into the water for a long time. But climbing, picking are the strengths of the lizards, so they make a deal, exchange food for the protection of the frog tribe. But we lizards also know how to protect ourselves. Why depend on others? RRak still felt that this exchange was unreasonable. But Owen kept saying that this forest was very dangerous. If it weren't for the protection of Shunan's frog tribe, he wouldn't have survived. It seemed that this guy voluntarily surrendered to the frog tribe and was not forced by anyone. RRak felt that he could not change his mind, so he did not mention this issue anymore. Forget it, I still have one more question to ask. That is how to become a good archer? Shunan was still enjoying the venison feast with RRak. This dish was grilled by Joel with many herbs, so Shunan ate very deliciously. Seeing the other party happy because of eating well, RRak asked casually if he had ever eaten water buffalo meat. Shunan's eyes lit up immediately. He replied that he had eaten it. Water buffalo meat was very delicious, but it had been a long time since the frogs caught any more. We just hunted a water buffalo, still alive. Do you want it? Shunan couldn't refuse this offer. But the price that RRak wanted to exchange was a bag of crossbows. The other party immediately wanted to agree, but was stopped by the frogs behind him. Ha! I can't agree. RRak also predicted this, so he just shrugged his shoulders regretfully and didn't bargain anymore. Seeing RRak's disappointed expression, Shunan hurriedly promised that after the two tribes became closer, they could discuss those things later. Fortunately, none of my tribesmen showed any hostility. Look, they are not only close to Owen but also can talk to your lizard warriors. Because in our village, the two races are very friendly with each other. Then, Shunan called Owen back to explain to RRak about the relationship between the two races in the village. Owen happily agreed, but RRak saw through the problem in this relationship. Those people seemed to deliberately show him that the two tribes lived in peace. Clearly they had prepared beforehand. If RRak hadn't talked to Owen before and seen through his unnatural attitude, he might have been fooled by the Shunans. The boring party was over. Shunan and his subordinates returned. Before the other party left, RRak still expressed his intention to visit Shunan's house next time. Shunan was about to agree but was stopped by the frogman behind him. Oh well, it doesn't matter, this place is big enough to see the whole area. When Shunan left, RRak could even see clearly how he put his arm around Owen and the awkward attitude of the lizard man. Joel also saw this. They both agreed that the relationship between Shunan and Owen was not equal at all. Therefore, the so-called peaceful coexistence was definitely not existent. Indeed, when he returned to the frog tribe, Owen was brutally beaten by the Shunan people. The reason was that they saw him talking privately with RRak when picking arrows. You think we don't know what you said to the leader of the lizard people? I didn't tell him anything. He asked me how to become a good archer and I just answered him. What kind of nonsense is that? You can't even shoot a decent arrow. That's the truth. But if I told him that, it would make him less suspicious. So I pretended I couldn't tell him, and if he wanted to learn, he had to pay a price. What did he say? He said he was sorry that he had nothing to give me, and then he didn't ask anything else. Shunan and the brown-skinned frogman looked at each other with satisfaction. Owen's answer suited them. It turned out that Owen was not voluntarily submissive to the frog people. But Shunan's clan had taken the children of the lizard tribe in the village as hostages to threaten. Owen couldn't let them become sacrifices, so he had to regard Shunan as his master and obey his orders. That night, Owen sat by the river of oblivion for a long time, feeling very regretful. He should have recognized the true face of the frog people sooner. Since they opened their arms to welcome the lizard tribe despite the racial difference, now there are only 200 lizard people in the village. They couldn't resist 1,500 frog people. Moreover, the frog tribe was protected by a ferocious two-headed monster. Owen thought of RRak, although this leader seemed to be a strong warrior. But they only had 600 people in the tribe, and they didn't even know what a bow and arrow was. So Owen didn't expect any salvation from the RRaks. Forget it, as long as they are sacrificed first, we can live a little longer. Thinking of this, Owen became indifferent to his own kind. Wait for me, son. I will make the lizard people come here to pay with their lives. A few days later, RRak really brought a live water buffalo to the gate of Shunan's village as a gift. Seeing the delicious food, his eyes lit up. But when he heard that RRak still wanted to keep the exchange price as a set of bow and arrow, Shunan hesitated. At this time, Owen was the first to speak. He thought that the two sides should learn more about each other before exchanging weapons. He also invited RRak and the skeleton team to visit the village. Then we can give you a bow and arrow set. This is a good opportunity to get to know each other, don't you think, Chief? In the time between these two meetings, both RRak and the frog people had their own calculations. RRak relied on his memory of the bow and arrow to make a similar weapon. But after all, it was a simulation. After many trials, he still couldn't achieve the distance and accuracy like the real thing that Shunan owned. Facing the situation that the frog people wanted to learn more about the lizard tribe, RRak felt a bit tense. He always felt that the frog people were not as friendly as they appeared. On the contrary, they seemed to be trying to do something. The problem was that RRak didn't know much about that tribe, so he was always in a state of tension and high alert. This time he had to achieve something. Did you pick the herbs yet? Yes, sir, there is a pharmacist who knows where they grow a lot. Good, that Owen guy, I wish he was the key to the problem. RRak always had a headache with that Owen guy, because he felt that Owen knew everything but was stuck with something that he couldn't say. If Owen helped, everything would be much easier. Then, why don't you give him a chance? On this side, the Shunin guys were also quite anxious. He constantly urged Owen to lure the RRak and the soldiers to the frog village, because the living sacrifice ritual needed to speed up the progress. Owen heard this and was very tense, because if he couldn't lure RRak and the soldiers to the frog village, the one who would be sacrificed was his son. And the reason why this ritual was sped up was because the health of the frog tribe chief and the elders was getting worse. They are sick? Is it that itching disease? Is it that dangerous? Shunin didn't want to reveal this to the other tribes. But in his eyes, this was not a big deal. His father had a very serious itching disease. If you have this disease, not only your whole body itches, but also a white slime covers your skin. Even if you try to scrape it off, it won't disappear but will spread more. Being covered with slime for a long time will cause difficulty breathing, and eventually death. Yesterday, a priest died of this disease. Owen listened and felt more tense. This was the first time he heard about this disease. Although Shunin said it was not a big deal, Owen felt it was clearly very serious. So telling him this must have a purpose, Owen felt Shunin was testing him. Now, just showing a hint of joy or surprise, Owen would surely not have a good end. So, he took a deep breath, and began to show a worried and painful face. This news can't be let the lizard people know, because among them, there must be someone who will despise the frogs. It's normal, we can't hide it forever. Even if this news spreads, there will be a way to suppress the lizard people. We can say that they also have the risk of getting this disease. Owen suggested to Shunin that there were some herbs that could disguise as this disease. One kind would produce white foam when crushed, one kind would cause itching. If combined, they could create an effect similar to the symptom of that disease. He also promised that he would inadvertently leak information to the RRak. After all, Owen was the one who interacted with the frogs the most. Shunin was very pleased to hear this. Owen was always the deceiver that he liked the most. He also promised that if Owen lured the RRak, his children would not be sacrificed anymore. I'm afraid we'll need a lot of sacrifices this time, so you have to try to persuade them. But Sir Shunin, Owen hesitated for a long time before daring to continue. But to facilitate this scam, I really think you should give them at least a few bows. Although not very happy, Shunin still prepared a few bows to exchange. Joel commanded everyone to collect all the anti-itch herbs in the area to exchange for weapons. The amount of herbs was more than enough for the frog people, so Shunin happily agreed to trade the bows right away. On the day of the meeting, RRak made another request. That was to have a private conversation with Owen. Shunin had no reason to refuse. He was currently instructing Owen to coax the RRak, so it was a chance for him to talk privately with RRak that he couldn't ask for. When only Owen and RRak were left, the cunning man quickly revealed his cards. He asked RRak to tell him about himself and his tribe first. Then, he would also reveal information about the frog people to exchange. I say this can help you remove your suspicion, right? After Owen finished the sentence, a butterfly appeared and landed on his head. Owen waved his hand to chase the butterfly away, but RRak thought of something. Yes, we have a lot of doubts between us. Let's end that. I'll tell you everything about us, Owen. After the private conversation, Owen returned with a lot of intelligence that made Shunin ecstatic. Not only that, RRak also promised to lead a few core soldiers to visit the frog village to express his understanding. Haha fools, Shunin laughed out loud. When they said they would show us their village, I wondered if it was a trap, but it turned out they were stupid. The brown-skinned frog named Oboy also agreed. The frog people had grasped the exact location and area of the RRak tribe's village. They also knew about medical history. Previously, a spy had told Shunin that the RRak tribe had 600 people. But in fact, after finding out, there were only about 300 people and 30 warriors. Shunin was very happy with these harvests. He asked Owen if he wanted to be rewarded. But all Owen wanted was Shunin to keep his promise not to make his son a sacrifice anymore. Although the sacrifice was the intention of the frog tribe chief, Shunin was not too rigid. He believed that his father would be sympathetic and not too harsh with Owen's people. Only then did he and his 200 fellows see the benefits of subduing the frog people. Don't worry, Owen, I will keep my word. Thank you, Shunin. That afternoon, Owen went to the river bank and looked towards the small island in the middle of the river. That was where the children were being held. He was full of confidence in a bright future, that the children would be saved. But at this moment, RRak's face appeared in his head. Owen's conscience was torn. In that private conversation, RRak even showed him his own writing of his tribe, along with countless secrets of them. I don't believe what you say about the frogs. There's probably more to the story behind it. We in our tribe have gone through a lot of pain. We understand what it's like to be isolated and abandoned. We are like people. I know what the face of a person in pain looks like. Owen unconsciously covered his face with his hand. RRak had hit his black heart. But even so, what then? Owen did not believe that RRak and his 30 core soldiers and civilians could defeat the frog people. For the sake of his son's safety, he still decided to lean towards the side he thought was stronger. Although RRak's words had moved him, but after all, Owen was just a con artist with a profession. He sat by the river from dusk until midnight before he got up. The beach was full of pictograms that RRak had just taught him. Perhaps, in his heart, Owen had to struggle a lot. You should not trust someone like me, not at all. Why do you want to trust a scammer like me? The next morning, RRak arrived as promised. Shunin greeted him early with a very friendly fake face. Welcome, my good friend. Thank you for your hospitality. I hope this trade will make the relationship between the two tribes closer. RRak also apologized to Shunin right away because they brought weapons. He explained that he was worried about encountering Cockatrice on the way. Shunin said it was okay on the outside, but inside he was sneering at RRak as a fool. Because in his eyes, the spear that RRak was holding in his hand could never defeat Cockatrice. He planned to treat RRak to a lifetime. After getting RRak drunk, Shunin would use a poisoned arrow to kill him. That's right, where's Owen? Shunin pointed to the far away. Owen was busy writing something on the ground. RRak took a few more steps to greet him. He was very surprised to see Owen writing the characters that he had just taught a few days ago. The day has come after RRak, where I write is also where you sit. The problem here is, the words that Owen wrote mean fake or lie. Realizing the seriousness of the problem, RRak took only 2 seconds to make his decision. He put on the buffalo skull mask. His eyes suddenly became very sharp. Ur. Start. Clear. Ur was one of the strongest warriors in RRak's tribe. Just after the clear sound, the spear in his hand flew away, hitting the throat of a frog on the opposite side. The frog people standing next to him showed confusion on their faces. The core team received orders to kill all the frog people from the prison chief, so they were even more bloodthirsty. In a moment, the party turned into a bloody battlefield. In a short time, almost all the soldiers in the frog tribe were killed. Those who have no fighting ability but RRak's side did not worry about that, because they had already had a backup plan. So Owen, yes, you have something to do. On this side, Shunin and those who ran away in time were hiding in a corner. When he knew Owen betrayed him, he was very angry, immediately ordered to summon all the warriors in the village to attack RRak's tribe. They also captured all the lizards living together in the village until the warriors arrived. While waiting for the reinforcements, Shunin ordered the soldiers to shoot arrows at RRak. All these arrows were soaked in frog poison. Just touch it and you will surely die in pain, but RRak had foreseen this. Therefore, the entire core team was equipped with solid armor. Those arrows could not pierce the armor, making Shunin gasp in astonishment. He temporarily had no new strategy, just ordered the soldiers to continue shooting arrows. That way, RRak's core team could not move on. But right then, a black smoke appeared temporarily obscuring the view. Shunin could not observe the situation on the opposite side. With this situation, the accuracy of the arrows shot out would decrease significantly. Shunin was really worried. He did not know what to do in this situation, nor did he know where the damn smoke came from. Owen was the author of this smoke. While the two sides were fighting, he received orders from RRak to burn the frog village. The other lizard people did not load Owen's purpose for a while. The black-striped lizards asked me to do this. Believe me, they will defeat the frog people. The lizard people did not believe it. Because after all, Owen was a traitor. As they looked into his determined eyes, they also felt shaken. With the current situation, even if the frog people won, they would not spare them. So they had to take a risk. So Owen had a few more helpers. The speed of arson was faster and the smoke was thicker. When Shunin witnessed his village being set on fire, he still didn't believe Owen had betrayed. But saving lives was the most important thing. Shunin ordered the soldiers to retreat. If he, the successor to the chief position, was in danger, the future of this tribe would also end. Elsewhere, Oboy, a close friend of Shunin, was also planning a battle. He secretly calculated, there were still 45 elite soldiers left. That number was still more advantageous than the lizard people. Oboy ordered the soldiers below to soak the frog poison into all the arrowheads and be ready in a fighting position. Soon, in the bushes nearby, there was a rustling sound. Oboy was tense as a string. He had a bad feeling, like the time he had to fight the damn Cockatrice bird. When the bush was lifted, he didn't know who the other party was, but Oboy ordered to shoot right away. A rain of arrows flew, but when he saw the thing in front, all the frog soldiers were frozen. It was Manon, the monster that RRak had tamed. After coming here, it seemed to adapt to the climate and Manon grew much faster. The poisonous arrows couldn't touch its body, even put them in its mouth. This little monster always ate like that. When he saw the frog people, he roared with joy. Clearly, this was a lavish buffet. Oh boy was terrified to see that the poison had no effect. His head was confused, he couldn't think of anything. He wanted to shoot Manon Drake in the eye but found it impossible. Manon's speed was too fast, shooting them was impossible. And its strength was far beyond the cockatrice. At this point, Oh boy suddenly came up with a plan. He rummaged through his bag, threw out a poisonous frog, Manon immediately snapped it up. The soldiers immediately understood, also pulled out all the poisonous frogs and threw them. They thought Manon would be poisoned, but unfortunately not. This action caught Joel's eye, making her laugh. Of course, Manon was not a normal monster. Its best ability was poison resistance. In another development, RRak's bone soldiers were still fighting. Shunan had run deep into the village, so the speed of sweeping the frog people was even faster. Soon after, Ur had finished the last one. RRak looked into the distance, where the village was burning. He felt very strange. The situation was so tense that Alroy, the great chief of the frog people, still hadn't appeared. Nebula was also smiling happily from above. Is it because of me? The cause of the itching disease in the frog people was given by, it was a virus named ACO023731. This was specific to the mucous membrane of amphibians, slow onset, very contagious and fatal. Around the time RRak decided to leave the old Holy Land, Nebula had painstakingly found this virus and spread it to the frog people. Because the disease was slow, they didn't notice at first. Only a while later, the great chief Alroy fell ill just before RRak came here for a short time. He decided to offer the god who protected his tribe the two-headed monster as a living sacrifice to many lizard people. But what if that's the case? Nebula sneered at them, the disease would not subside because of that. Alroy had not appeared until now, because he was busy on the small island in the middle of the river to start the sacrificial ritual. Owen ran to RRak's place after setting fire to the river, he couldn't sit still anymore. The lives of the children, including his son, were threatened. You should have said it earlier, they have boarded the boat, we can't go to the island anymore. Owen heard it like thunder in his ears. He suggested that RRak could swim there. But this was too dangerous. Underwater, the strength of the lizard tribe could not compare with the frogs. Moreover, when swimming, they could not defend against the poisonous arrows of the frog people. But Owen fell into a deep abyss of despair, his tears flowed like a waterfall. My son is there. The boy was chosen as a sacrifice. RRak was furious, he couldn't control his emotions, and immediately slapped Owen. You fool. You should have said it sooner, right? Before, you should have trusted me sooner. Why did you only agree to talk about the sacrificial plan at the end? I don't believe in the gods that the frogs worship. I only believe that we can defeat them with our own strength. If that god appears and attacks, I will show you how to defeat the god. Owen covered his face and sobbed, maybe he regretted his hesitation. Owen should have said everything from the beginning. But it was too late, at this time, under the sacrificial ritual, the two-headed monster had appeared. Alroy offered the children of the lizard tribe with the wish that their god would heal them and punish the lizard tribe of RRak. Orwin sat by the river, lost in thought looking towards the island. His mood at this time had hit rock bottom, despair enveloped his entire mind in an instant. RRak and Joel also looked in that direction, his heart began to waver. RRak wanted to try one more time, even though this time they didn't have the advantage of terrain. Trickery is now useless, and it may have to be sacrificed. But just then, Nebula's butterfly appeared, Owen. Hearing RRak's call, Owen just said yes but was still immersed in pain. Look! Until he looked up, he suddenly saw a miracle. Under the beautiful moonlight in the night, a giant creature with the shape of a beetle appeared. And RRak's words at this time were also not full of momentum unlike the worry just now. Owen, do you believe in magic?